Okay, let's unpack this. So if you're anything like us, you probably heard it a million times. Get closure, move on. Right.
Mm.
It seems to dictate how we handle, well, everything. Bad breakups, grief, even big public events.
Uh-huh.
But what if that whole idea, that whole quest for a neat, tidy ending,
Hmm.
what if it's actually flawed?
That's exactly what we're digging into today. It's this surprisingly consistent idea across different fields, philosophy, psychology, even literature, that maybe embracing uncertainty, permanent uncertainty, is the real way to find peace.
Okay.
So we're connecting Albert Camus and his philosophy of the absurd with modern psychological critiques, the whole myth of closure thing, and then also looking at how fragmented narratives, in modernist writing like Catherine Mansfield's work, reflect this.
So we've stacked up these different angles to basically ask, what does real liberation look like if we admit that life is unresolved, maybe even beautifully so?
Exactly. And where better to start than with, well, probably the most fundamental question there is.
Camus, the myth of Sisyphus. He really just throws down the gauntlet, doesn't he?
He really does. He basically says, look, forget arguing about politics or the meaning of life in some abstract sense for a moment. The only truly serious philosophical problem is suicide.
Wow. Okay.
It's about judging whether life is actually worth living.
Yeah.
Everything else, he argues, just follows from that judgment.
That is heavy.
But it sets the stage perfectly for his main idea, the absurd. And I think people hear absurd and maybe think silly or just plain weird.
Yeah, that's a common misconception.
Yeah.
But Camus means something much deeper, more fundamental. The absurd isn't just, a property of the world, nor is it simply a feeling we have. He calls it the divorce.
The divorce.
Yeah, the confrontation, the clash between two things. On one side, there's us, humans, with this deep-seated, wild longing for clarity and reason. We just need things to make sense. We need a why.
Okay, I get that.
And on the other side, you have the universe, the unreasonable silence of the world. It just doesn't give us the neat answers we crave. So, the absurd isn't the world being irrational, and it's not just us feeling lost. It's the tension between our need for meaning and the world's refusal to provide it on our terms.
Exactly right. It cannot exist without both sides of that equation. And this tension, Camus says, it's even more intense because, well, there's no easily accessible God, no universal purpose handed down to us.
We're kind of on our own.
We're left with, the likelihood of suffering and the absolute certainty of death. And our reason just screams that this can't be right, it's unacceptable, but the world, it just stays silent, offers no explanation.
He makes it so visceral too, doesn't he? Like in The Plague, the example of a child dying painfully. It's arbitrary. It defies any rational explanation that could possibly satisfy that human need for why. Why that child? Why that suffering? There's no answer.
And that realization that the world fundamentally isn't rational in the way we want it to be, that's the core of the absurd. Trying to force reason onto it is just futile.
And living with that futility, that tension, that's the opposite of closure.
Absolutely. Which brings us to the next piece.
Okay, this is where I think it gets really interesting. Because that big philosophical clash you described, it maps almost perfectly onto a huge shift happening in psychology right now. We're all told constantly, seek closure.
Right. It's everywhere.
But many grief experts are now saying, hold on, that whole concept, it's basically a myth.
A myth, yeah, and some even call it a scam.
A scam? Why?
Well, the critique is that when people say they're seeking closure, what they're usually looking for is something external.
Like what?
Like an apology from someone, or that one final conversation, maybe an explanation that ties everything up neatly, some kind of outside validation for their pain.
Okay.
But study after study shows that actual healing, sustainable healing, it's almost always an internal process. It relies on things like acceptance, self-awareness, developing self-compassion.
Not on getting something from someone else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you hinge your healing on getting that external thing, that apology, that explanation, and it never comes,
then you're just stuck.
Yeah.
Indefinitely.
Precisely. Which reminds me strongly of Pauline Boss's work on ambiguous loss.
Yes, that feels so relevant here. Explain that a bit.
Ambiguous loss is essentially any loss that isn't clear-cut. There's no official verification, no neat resolution. Think of a soldier missing in action, or a family member slowly disappearing into dementia, or even a relationship that just kind of dissolves without a big fight or a clear ending.
Right. There's no closure moment possible there.
There really isn't. And Boss's crucial insight is that healing in those situations means you have to shift your goal. It's not about achieving closure anymore. It's about finding meaning and learning to live with the ambiguity despite the lack of a final answer. You define the meaning internally.
It really sounds like demanding closure is often just another way of trying to demand control over something uncontrollable.
I think that's a huge part of it. One source we looked at actually uses this term soft control.
Tough control.
Yeah, the idea that sometimes people mistake silence or ambiguity from others for, well, maybe hidden affection or potential. Or they just cling to seeking clarity because letting go of that illusion of control, it feels scarier than actually facing the grief or the uncertainty head on.
We hate the vacuum. We want answers, even bad ones sometimes.
And sometimes, the lack of clarity isn't some deep mystery. It's just the other person choosing not to be clear. It's that simple and that hard to accept.
And this push for external answers, for closure, it has these massive ripple effects in society too.
Well,
We see it weaponized almost in the justice system.
Definitely. The idea of providing closure for victims' families is frequently used as a justification for things like, say, the death penalty.
Right, you hear that argument all the time.
But the research consistently shows that it just doesn't really work that way. External legal finality, like an execution, very rarely delivers the promised relief. Yeah, in fact, it can often make things worse for families. It can drag out the legal process for years, decades sometimes, keeping the wound open and actually delaying their ability to find some kind of internal peace.
Is there specific data on that?
There is. We found a striking comparison from a 2012 study. It looked at victims' families in Minnesota, which doesn't have the death penalty, and compared them to families in Texas, which uses it frequently.
Okay.
The families in Minnesota reported significantly higher levels of physical, psychological, and behavioral health than those in Texas.
Wow. So the prolonged search for that external final fix might actually be more damaging than accepting the lack of one.
The findings really suggest that the pain seems to be compounded by the extended pursuit of an external resolution that may never satisfy.
Okay, so if seeking external closure is often futile, even damaging, and Kemma says trying to force rational meaning onto the silent universe is like philosophical suicide. What's the alternative? How are we supposed to live in that permanent tension?
Well, Camus doesn't just leave us hanging in despair. He says accepting the absurd doesn't lead to resignation. Instead, it leads to three crucial consequences. They transform the absurd from, a reason to give up into a powerful guide for living.
Okay, what are they?
Revolt, freedom, and passion.
Hold on, let's take revolt. That sounds, well, frankly exhausting, maybe even miserable. Is he just saying we should be perpetually angry and struggling?
That's a fair question, but it's not about misery. It's about consciousness. Revolt, for Camus, isn't about overthrowing governments, necessarily. It's a constant internal confrontation, a permanent revolution within your own experience.
How so?
It's acknowledging the certainty of a crushing fate, the absurdity, the lack of ultimate answers, the inevitability of death, but without the resignation that you'd think should go with it.
Oh, okay.
He demands we die unreconciled. It means refusing to accept easy, comforting answers, whether they come from religion or politics or even, say, a partner who ghosted you. It's maintaining your integrity against the chaos, refusing to pretend things make sense when they don't.
Okay, that reframes it completely. It's not misery, it's an active refusal to surrender your consciousness, your clear sight.
Exactly. It's an active stance, which leads directly to the second consequence, freedom.
How does revolt lead to freedom? Seems counterintuitive.
Well, the freedom Camus talks about is a bit paradoxical. Real inner freedom, he argues, comes from truly deeply accepting that there is no future.
No future, that sounds bleak.
He doesn't mean literally no tomorrow. He means no guaranteed purpose, no cosmic blueprint you're obligated to follow, no predetermined endpoint you must reach to have lived a good life.
Ah, I see. It's freedom from obligation.
Precisely. Freedom from the slave-like demands of some imagined future-perfect self or destiny. You're released from the judgment of what you should be achieving according to some external standard. Your life is yours right now.
Okay, so you have this constant conscious revolt against false meaning, which gives you freedom from external obligation. What's the third one?
Passion. Yes. Once you've accepted the revolt and the freedom, your whole focus shifts. The absurd man, as Camus called him, stops worrying so much about the quality of living, which is usually judged by external values, right? Like success or piety or whatever. And instead focuses on the quantity of experience.
Quantity over quality, that sounds Hedonistic?
Not necessarily in a shallow way. What counts is the most living. It means maximizing your consciousness of your own life, your own revolt, your own freedom, being intensely present to the experiences you are having because there's no external scoreboard judging them. It's about living as much as possible, as aware as possible.
And the ultimate image he gives us for this, it's Sisyphus, right? Condemned forever to push a rock up a hill, only to watch it roll down again.
That's the one. And crucially, Camus tells us, one must imagine Sisyphus happy.
Happy. Pushing a rock forever. How?
Because his fate, his absurd task, belongs to him. He owns it. By consciously accepting the eternal repetitive nature of his struggle, he transforms it. It's no longer a divine punishment. It becomes a human matter, something to be dealt with on human terms. Through his own consciousness and revolt, he finds meaning in the struggle itself, not in reaching the top.
Okay. That's a powerful philosophical framework, and it's fascinating how this internal state, this kind of fractured consciousness living in tension, is actually mirrored in art, particularly in certain kinds of literature.
Absolutely. We see it brilliantly reflected in the narrative techniques of modernist writers like Catherine Mansfield. We look specifically at her story, The Daughters of the Late Colonel.
Right. The style itself feels fragmented,
Yeah.
jumpy.
Exactly. And Mansfield isn't just doing that for stylistic flair. Those fragments, the sudden shifts between past and present, the unfinished sentences, the trailing thoughts, it's a very deliberate technique. It's designed to mirror the inner lives of the characters, the Pinner sisters.
And they are completely stuck, aren't they? Their oppressive father is finally dead, they're physically free, but psychologically, they're paralyzed.
Utterly paralyzed. They can't make the simplest decisions, like what to do with their father's old top hat or his slippers. They're trapped between relief and guilt, past and present. Memory just keeps flooding in, interrupting any forward momentum.
So the fragmented narrative isn't just about their confusion, it is their confusion enacted on the page.
Precisely. The nonlinear structure reflects how consciousness actually works, doesn't it? Life isn't a neat A to B plotline. Our inner reality is messy, fragmented. Memories intrude, emotions overlap, things don't happen in a tidy sequence. The sisters are stuck partly because they're still searching for that linear closure narrative in a life that's inherently unresolved. Their inner life is all that Camusian tension.
And this literary technique, this reflection of fragmented experience, actually touches on something quite fundamental about how we perceive time itself, based on memory.
Right. Psychologists and philosophers often distinguish between two main types of memory. There's semantic memory and episodic memory.
Oh, okay, break those down.
Sure. Semantic memory is basically your internal database of facts and general knowledge. Things like knowing Paris is the capital of France, or the rules of grammar, or that 2 plus 2, 4. These are kind of timeless truths. They can be about the past, present, or future concepts.
Got it. Factual knowledge.
Exactly. But episodic memory, that's different. That's remembering a specific event as you experienced it. It's retaining the unique first-person knowledge of what it was like to live through something.
Like remembering the specific taste of your birthday cake last year, or the feeling of the sun on your face during a particular moment.
Precisely that. The smell, the feeling, the specific sequence of perceptions. And this kind of memory, episodic memory, is fundamentally rooted in the past. It demonstrates what some call the epistemic arrow of time. Meaning you can only gain that specific what it was like knowledge after the experiences happen. You can anticipate the future, you can know facts about the past, but you can only remember an episode in that rich experiential way once it's gone. It roots us in the irreversible flow of time. The past, in that sense, is fixed. We possess knowledge of it in a way we can't possess knowledge of the future.
Okay, so we have Camus saying, embrace the tension, psychology saying, forget external closure, literature showing fragmented reality, and memory itself rooting us in an irreversible past. When we pull all these threads together, what's the core message about maybe integrity or living well?
I think it really comes down to a kind of courage. The courage to resist easy answers, to refuse comforting illusions.
How so?
Well, Camus was quite critical of some other philosophers, like Kierkegaard, for example. He argued they recognized the absurd, they saw the confrontation between our longing and the world's silence.
But then?
But then, he said, they couldn't bear the tension. They performed what he called philosophical suicide. They made a leap.
A leap of faith.
Essentially, yes. A leap to religious hope, or to some kind of transcendent external reason or meaning that resolved the conflict. He saw it as a kind of intellectual trick, an emotional conjuring.
Because it negated one side of the equation.
Yeah.
It got rid of the world's silence by imposing an answer on it.
Exactly. They couldn't stay on what Camus called the dizzying crest of the absurd conflict. They jumped off to find the comfort of a solution below.
And for Camus, the real integrity was staying on that crest, living in the tension.
That's it. Holding both terms, the longing and the silence, in your consciousness without flinching. And this philosophical stance, it perfectly mirrors the psychological work needed for what you might call self-closure.
How so?
The path to genuine peace, psychologically, involves letting go of the need for that external fix, the apology, the explanation, the verdict. You have to prioritize your internal state, your own meaning-making, over the chaos and uncertainty of waiting for something outside yourself.
So the refusal to make the philosophical leap is like the psychological refusal to keep demanding that external apology or explanation. You don't need their permission or the universe's permission to find peace or move forward.
Beautifully put. It's the difference between those old linear models of grief that insisted you must reach a stage of completion or detachment.
Which often doesn't happen.
Right. Versus newer, nonlinear models that acknowledge grief and uncertainty can be ongoing. They oscillate, they change shape, but they don't necessarily have a neat endpoint. Some things remain unresolved.
It reminds me of that quote by the poet Rilke.
Ah, yes. Live the questions now.
Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. It's about inhabiting the uncertainty, not forcing a premature solution.
Precisely. Don't demand the answer. Live into it.
So when we synthesize all this, the core takeaway seems to be that real freedom, whether you're thinking philosophically like Camus, or emotionally like a grief counselor, or even artistically like Mansfield, it comes from lucidity.
Lucidity. Yeah, that's a great word for it.
That clear-eyed, courageous refusal of comforting illusions. Accepting that some things, maybe many things, will just remain fragmented, unresolved. And that's okay.
It really is. The deepest kind of integrity, the deepest peace, seems to come from that internal revolt, that commitment to self-closure, rather than constantly chasing external fixes that may never arrive or satisfy.
Okay, so let's leave our listeners with something to really chew on, connecting that irreversible past we talked about, episodic memory,
Yeah.
with the choices we make now.
Right. So if episodic memory gives you this unique, fixed knowledge of what it was like to experience something.
What it was like to be you in that moment.
Exactly. And if making decisions about your future is at least partly about deciding which experiences you want to eventually look back on, which memories you want to possess.
Yeah.
How does knowing that true closure, true peace comes from within? How does that change the choices you're making today? The choices that will become those fixed episodic memories you'll carry with you.
Thinking about the experiences you're creating right now, the ones that will eventually form your own unchangeable, maybe beautifully unresolved past.
Something to think about.